Well, it's been a while since the last video on Jonathan Edwards' Theology of Beauty. I was taking time to finish up the animation on Holy Saturday, and so I finished that up, and I'm beginning work on a new one now, but in the in-between period, I wanted to get this next video in this Jonathan Edwards series shot. So that's what we're doing. I'm going to refer to my notes because it just goes more quickly if I can look at the notes and not try to be fancy and act like I have all this just off the top of my head. So I don't. I'm reading from notes. There you go. Or kind of referencing notes. It's not quite reading straight from. So in the last video, we looked at two concepts of beauty that derive from Jonathan Edwards' relational view of all of reality. He has this relational view of reality built on the relationality of the triune God. And if you want a recap of that, look at the first and the second video. What we talked about, though, in the second video was simple beauty and complex beauty. Simple beauty was the idea of just two or more objects narrowly considered and their consent or their agreement with one another. So the more consent, the more agreement between two simple objects, the more simple beauty. It's kind of a narrow lens beauty. Then we looked at complex beauty, which looks at the consent between two or more objects, but this takes into account a larger pattern, a broader pattern. So you might think of complex beauty as kind of wide angle beauty. So complex or proportional beauty is the beauty of real life. It's the beauty that we see around us when we look at things or look at people or hear stories or listen to music or filter current events and take them in and make aesthetic judgment calls on them. The beauty we see around us or the disfigurement we see around us in an object or a person or a story or an event or a piece of art, whatever, it's never determined by just that entity narrowly considered, as if that entity is a universe unto itself and the only thing that matters is this thing right here beautiful or not. You can't even determine if something is beautiful without reference to other things, without relationship to other things. Jonathan Edwards said, one alone cannot be beautiful. Beauty is relationality to other things, and so beauty is determined or perceived only as two or more things are related to one another in light of a whole. So we're surrounded when we go out in our daily lives by a kaleidoscopic interplay of images and concepts, sounds and stories, all of them weaving together so that the beauty or disfigurement of anything is not determined by considering a single entity in and of itself, but the beauty or disfigurement of anything is determined by viewing an entity that we're considering, by viewing it in light of the whole pattern. Something becomes beautiful or disfigured as it fits into the larger pattern, as it fits into the greater weave of aesthetic reality. And so you don't have to be conscious of this to make this connection. When you see something, your mind, your imagination is already making these connections. It's already putting things in place. It's already saying, hey, that works. That's beautiful. That's pleasant. That looks good. And you might not know why, but it's because of the way aspects of an entity harmoniously agree with what's around it. That's true visually. It's true in music. It's true in stories. It's true in people. That's how we perceive beauty. So what this means is that the overarching pattern is determinative of what's beautiful. The overarching pattern of beauty, it determines what is beautiful within that pattern. Because something's only beautiful if it agrees with that overarching pattern, if it consents to that overarching pattern. So the natural question is, what is that overarching pattern of beauty? Not just in a particular picture or in a particular story or in a particular moment of history, but for all of reality. What is the beautiful pattern over all of reality, which by consenting to something becomes beautiful? And by dissenting from, something is disfigured. What is that that controlling image or pattern of beauty. We'll spend a whole video looking at that when we look at ultimate beauty in a little bit. But for now, and this is probably no big surprise to any of you, the triune God is beauty, and his beauty determines all beauty and all disfigurement. But there's a lot to say there, and we'll come back to it. For now, what I want to look at is two categories of beauty, kind of subcategories that derive from this idea of complex beauty. So these two categories are disfigured beauty and beautiful disfigurement. So I put these little quote marks because the second word there is not actually true of the thing. Disfigured beauty is actually disfigurement, and beautiful disfigurement is actually beauty. We're going to look at both of those in the upcoming videos. Today, we're going to look at disfigured beauty. What's this concept mean? It's a concept that derives from Edwards' idea of complex beauty. So that's where we're going today. What is disfigured beauty? So Edwards actually gives us a quote to explain disfigured beauty, and this is from the Essay on the Mind, which I'm including a link to in the description of the video. So Edwards says, "That which is beautiful, considered by itself separately, and deformed when considered as a part of something else more extended, is false beauty," or what I'm calling disfigured beauty. So basically he's saying if something is beautiful when you look at it narrowly, without consideration to the overall pattern, and yet when you zoom out and look at it in relation to the overall pattern, you all of a sudden realize it's dissenting, it disagrees with the broader pattern, then this is false beauty, or what I'm calling disfigured beauty. It looks good up close, but when considered in light of the broader pattern, it's revealed to be disfigurement. So a simple example of this would be these two circles. They consent when viewed up close, but when you realize that this is the overall pattern that they're a part of, all of a sudden what looked like consent or agreement when you were zoomed in is revealed to actually be dissent, disagreement, disfigurement when you're zoomed out. So let's look at a few real-life examples of disfigured beauty. One would be, say you go out to eat, you're at a restaurant, and you see this man and woman sitting at the table, and they're laughing, they're sharing a meal together, they're obviously very in love. All that's good. All that's beautiful, narrowly considered. You'd say, yeah, this is beautiful. But what if you zoom out and the husband is married to a woman who's at home right now with a migraine, trying to take care of her kids, wondering why her husband isn't back yet. And if this woman, her husband, because she is married to somebody else, is at home in a wheelchair because doing his work as a contractor, he fell off a ladder and hurt himself, he can't work anymore, he's home hoping his wife's having a good time on her business trip, as far as he knows. When you take that into account, then what looked beautiful narrowly considered all of a sudden becomes an instance of disfigurement broadly considered. Now you might think, that's not disfigured. They're doing what makes them happy. They're doing the best they can. This is still a good thing, and I'm for it. If that's your perspective, it's because we share a different view of the broader pattern of what is beautiful. And I'll talk about that in just a second, but hold on to your thoughts there, and let's look at another example. Now this one is maybe going to be divisive or controversial. The last thing I want to do is get into a political discussion. Personally, it's hard for me not to just despise any kind of political talk because it's just, I struggle to see the value in it. So I'm not trying to politicize this, but I think that this is an issue where the things we're talking about here have a unique applicability. So bear with me in addressing this issue. Think about mind, hand, eye coordination. That's good. That's a beautiful thing. A doctor at work, skilled, using his skills, that's a beautiful thing. Medical inventions that can see through skin and bone and save life, that's a beautiful thing. The willing and the choosing capacity of the human being, in and of itself, that's a beautiful thing. That's an image of God. But though all these various aspects are beautiful considered in themselves, what about when the mind-hand-eye coordination of the doctor is being used to dismember a child in the womb? Or what about when the medical interventions that are able to save life are being used to end life? Some of the same tools that could be used to keep a heart going are used to stop a heart from beating. What about when the willing and the choosing capacity of a human soul is making the choice to put, well, let's just say making the choice to put to death a child that's being carried? In this case, these things that are in and of themselves excellent, in and of themselves beautiful, are being employed in a way that when you view the larger pattern that they're being employed in, you see that this is a disfigured thing. This is not a beautiful thing. This is an ugly thing. Now, my point here is not to bring in politics. I know, unfortunately, abortion is inseparable from politics, but that's not my intention. All I'm trying to say is each of these aspects, narrowly considered, is a beautiful thing. The skill of a doctor, the technology that can save lives, the choosing and willing capacity of the human being, beautiful things. But when you see how they're being used, and then you look at how they're being used in light of the broader pattern of what is true beauty, you realize, no, this is a disfigured thing. This is an ugly and a broken thing. It's not a beautiful thing. Now, the broader pattern I'm referring to there, remember we said originally it's the triune God, but even a little bit lower down than that, the broader pattern of beauty that flows from the triune God is the inherent beauty of self-giving for the sake of others. The inherent beauty of life and the value of life, and the excellence of caring for the needy and the weak and the powerless. These things flow as implications from that broader pattern of the triune God, who is himself beauty. And so when something is dissenting to one of these aspects, and these are just three I've picked, when something dissents to those, it is disfigured because it dissents to the broader pattern of what is beautiful, namely the triune God. Now, this is why I wanted to address this issue, because some people must think that abortion is beautiful. Maybe some of you watching this think, I can't stand what this guy is saying. Abortion is a good thing. Abortion is a beautiful thing. And some people must think that abortion is beautiful because we only pursue what we believe to be ultimately what we believe will be or is beautiful. So some people must say abortion is a beautiful thing. How can it be that some would say abortion is a beautiful thing and some would say abortion is a disfigured, ugly thing? And plug in any issue or any situation. How could some say this is good and some say this is bad? We're talking about the same thing. How does that work? The reason that happens, I would submit, in Edwards, it's part of his overall aesthetic philosophy, that the reason this disagreement happens between people's opinions is because they have a different understanding of what overarching beauty is. And that brings us to the last thing I want to address in today's video, and that's that what we understand to be supreme beauty, what we understand to be the controlling pattern in all of reality of what beauty is, that is going to determine our perception of all beauty and all disfigurement. whatever I perceive to be supreme beauty, that will determine everything that I say is beautiful or is disfigured, because whether I know it or not, whether I'm conscious of it or not, my imaginative perceiving eye is relating everything I see to this overall pattern of beauty and saying that's beautiful or that's disfigured. And those judgment calls are being made based upon what I perceive, what I understand to be supremely beautiful. So look at this pattern here again. This was from the last video. The overarching pattern of the red cross in the middle of the blue field, that's determining what is beautiful or what is consenting in this image. So if something disagrees with the overall pattern of the red cross in the blue field, well, then it's dissenting. It's disfigured. If something agrees with the overall pattern of the red cross in the blue field, then it's consenting. Then it's beautiful. Because in this example, the red cross in the blue field is the controlling pattern that determines beauty or disfigurement in this context, in this little snippet of reality here. Similarly, whatever a person perceives to be the supreme, overarching pattern of beauty in all of reality, that will determine what is beautiful and what is good and what is true for that person, in that person's perception of reality. So one of the implications of Edwards' system here is that ethics and morality ultimately resolve into aesthetics. Something is good or bad, right or wrong, based on whether it is beautiful. Does it accord with, does it consent to the overarching pattern of reality, or does it dissent from? If it consents to it, it's beautiful, which also means it's good, and it's ultimately true. If it dissents from that overarching pattern, then it's disfigured, which also means it's evil and ultimately false in what it's asserting. So when we say something like abortion is right or abortion is wrong, what we're actually saying is abortion agrees with the overarching pattern of beauty I have, and therefore it's beautiful. Or we're saying abortion disagrees with the overarching pattern of beauty that I have, and therefore it's disfigured and wrong. The same goes for every question of ethics or morality that we would face. Determining what is right and wrong in any given situation is a matter of determining what beauty looks like in that situation. Or to say it another way, determining what consents with the overarching pattern of all reality in this given instance of reality. So you can see how in Edwards' philosophy, what someone perceives to be the supreme and overarching pattern of beauty determines their perception of all the rest of reality. Not only their aesthetic perception, what they perceive to be beautiful around them, but also their moral perception, what's good, what's wrong, and also their perception of what's supremely true, what's finally true, what's telling the truth, and what's telling a lie, what's going to be shown to be false. Perception of beauty, whether cognitively recognized or not, our perception of the overarching pattern of beauty determines our perception of all these other things. So you could say that people who have different perceptions, different understandings of what is supremely beautiful, see and interact with and make decisions in two completely separate universes. Because these are completely different universes where one person says this is right, one person says it's wrong, one person says this is horrible and disfigured, one person says this is excellent and beautiful. Why? Because their understanding of supreme beauty is different, and therefore that trickles down into their perception of everything, and they essentially live in two different realities from each other. I think that's part of the reason we can talk past each other and we can have such disagreement with each other, especially in our present American culture. I don't know where you're watching from, but I live in Ohio, and there's such a powerful division in so many places. And I think that can be traced to what we see as beautiful, what we perceive to be beautiful, supremely so. Now, what I've been saying might sound a little like, hey, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, and if it's beautiful to you, it's beautiful. If it's not, it's not. In a sense, yes, different people have different perceptions of what's beautiful, therefore different perceptions of what is good and what is true. But I would argue that true beauty is objective. There is a true, objective, unchanging, unalterable reality behind the term beauty. And this reality, this person, determines what is beautiful. Something is beautiful or disfigured based on how it consents or dissents to this single, unchanging, objective, personal reality, who is the one true triune God that we know in Jesus Christ, crucified and risen. He is beauty, and disfigurement or beauty, what is good or what is wrong, is determined by how it relates to this one. And so you might say that the great work of the gospel is to reveal, by the gracious working of the Spirit, to reveal true beauty as truly beautiful, and then to realign our perception of reality with what is truly beautiful. When the Spirit shines into our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory or the beauty of God in the face of Jesus Christ, God himself is saying, here is beauty. Here is what is true beauty. It's me, known in the crucified and risen Jesus. And as we perceive that, as we perceive true beauty, and our heart is able to respond by saying, that is beauty, that is beautiful, then our perception of all reality begins to be realigned and reordered with what is true. When that north star of true beauty is hung in its rightful place, then all the other points of our aesthetic and moral compass can line up in relation to the true beauty we know in the gospel. Now, one question that might be brought up by what I just said is this. If we recognize something to be beautiful because it consents or agrees with supreme beauty, and if we have different understandings of supreme beauty, how can it be that we agree on anything being beautiful? How can it be that a person who believes God in Christ is supreme beauty and a person who does not can still say that movie was beautiful, that story was beautiful, that picture is beautiful, that song is beautiful? How can they even speak the same language of beauty at all? And I think one answer to that question is that whether or not we recognize God in Christ as that overarching pattern of beauty, whether or not we recognize that, we are still grounded in that God. We are still created by, sustained in, and intended for the triune God. And so we're like tuning forks that are built to a certain frequency. And whenever that frequency impacts that fork, it resonates because that's how it's built. And so similarly, the human soul is like a tuning fork that resonates to the frequency of the triune God. Wherever his essential nature, which is ultimately love, which we'll talk about in a few videos, wherever his essential nature is on display in an image or in the harmony of parts in a landscape or in music or whatever, wherever the essential nature of the God for whom we exist is on display, our souls resonate to that frequency and we recognize something of beauty, whether or not we know him. The difference being then someone who has seen and known God in Christ, beauty himself in the gospel, they recognize that frequency to which our souls resonate, the frequency which is the triune God, which we acknowledge as beauty wherever an aspect of it appears in creation. The Christian recognizes that frequency is not merely a sound, to continue with the analogy. It's not just a tone, it's a name being spoken. So we recognize that this is not just a nameless, contentless frequency, not just a contentless experience of beauty. we recognize that this frequency that resonates in our soul as beauty is the name that is definitively articulated on Calvary. And so that's where the disagreement comes in. When you realize that this frequency is not just a faceless experience, but a personal name, then it begins to alter other things about how we perceive all of reality, because now reality is relating to this personal revelation rather than this something else, impersonal experience. So next time, we're going to look at this idea of beautiful disfigurement. And then once we've done that, we'll move on to spiritual beauty and ultimate beauty. So this series is going to take a little bit of time, but I'm doing it slowly but surely because I do think these are important things to get out and to talk about. And so for those of you who watch, I will continue to do it. It just will take a little bit of time. So thanks for your patience, and I would love to interact with you on some of these concepts because I know this isn't just a cut and dry thing. So thanks for watching, and I will talk with you later.